This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 269, Home Automation. Welcome to Talking Drupal. We have a very special guest today to talk about the considerations when putting together a home automation system. Thank you for joining us today, Nic Laflin.
Surprise.
Glad to be here. Very excited to join. Long-time listener.
Nic, you've talked about home automation on many of your updates over the past probably 2 years. So today we get to dig a little deeper. Before we do that, joining me, Stephen Cross, as usual, is John Picozzi from Oomph.
Hello,
what up, John?
Internet friends. I want to talk about something near and dear to my heart. That's Drupal swag. And I actually just got this great Drupal NedCamp mug, and there's a shirt over here as well from the Drupal swag shop, which is awesome because I think NedCamp, I'm not trying to be braggadocious, but I think NedCamp is the first camp to actually offer their t-shirt on the Drupal swag shop. And, I think that's awesome for a lot of reasons. The biggest being it supports the Drupal Association. I also think it's going to be very cool when other camps get on to be able to do that, to be able to go to the site and see a whole bunch of camps with a whole bunch of different logos and designs. And as I understand it, we are working on getting Talking Drupal stuff up there. So stand by. We'll let you know when and if that happens. But, I think it's great. Everybody loves brand. Well, maybe not everybody, but I sure love branded stuff. So being able to see a place where we can kind of go and indirectly donate to the Drupal Association is really great, I think.
Yeah, it's great. So joining us as our guest and our host, I'm going to skip any formal introductions this week, Nic. But Nic Laflin from Latent Development, what's up with you this week?
Not too much. I just wanted to give a quick tip this week. We used to do weekly tips. I got a notice today that I was running out of space on my machine. And so I just did some cleanup. I actually moved some of the recordings from the show to my network storage to clean up some stuff. And I decided to do a little bit of a deeper dive. I have a separate SSD that stores all my Docker information, just so that I don't ever have to worry about running out of space. It's an SSD. It runs really fast. But today I was looking at that and it was getting kind of big. There's a Prune command in Docker. So if you use a Docker-based development system like Lando or I believe DDev, when you build an environment, you'll sometimes end up with abandoned images or containers or networks, and Prune can clean that up. So you can just say like Docker image Prune or Docker container Prune, and it will delete anything that's not currently being used. Now, read the documentation on
it deleting, Nic?
It depends on the flags that you send it, but you can, for example, tell it to delete any images not currently used. You can tell it to delete any containers not currently running. You can tell it to delete anything that's not running that hasn't been run in the last week. So you can kind of fine tune it, but I just ran the base image Prune today because I don't really care if it deletes some unnecessary images. I'll just re-download them. And it cleared up 60 gigabytes of data.
Oh, man.
So
okay.
It was pretty significant. I do very heavily Docker-based development, so your results may vary, but just a quick service announcement. If you're using a Docker-based system, sometimes it's good to go in and clean up what you've got. You can also clean up volumes and other things too, but you got to be a bit more careful with volumes.
Yeah, when you record this show, Nic does the backup recordings with OBS. It probably eats up a couple of 2 gigabytes per show, right, per episode. So if you let that go too long, you can chunk up an SSD pretty quickly.
Yep, absolutely.
So for me this week, totally non-tech information. So a little coronavirus related too. So my wife had some new glasses made maybe 3 months ago, and going to the doctors, as you know, is always a fiasco now with coronavirus, right? So before, when she got new glasses when she needed them adjusted, because when you first get them, they kind of get loose, they don't fit right. You just make an appointment, go in, and someone takes care of you. Now it's a process to actually just stop in and get your glasses adjusted. So she's done that a couple of times, but last week her glasses were like really, really loose. And I said, we'll just pick up we'll get a new screw. She couldn't screw it in, or something was wrong with it. So she was trying to tighten the screw and lost it. It fell out, dropped somewhere, couldn't find the screw, the little tiny one. So I said, no big deal. I'll just run up to the store and I'll grab one of those little kits. So I went up to the store, grabbed one of those little kits for a couple of bucks. The screw didn't fit. She must have like this unique screw. Don't know what it is. So I said, okay, no big deal. Let me just go somewhere else. I'll try a different store and I'll grab a different kit. Nope, those screws didn't work. So I went on Amazon and I bought a kit for like $10. I had like 15 different sizes of like all the screws you could possibly need. It came in last night. None of those screws fit.
Oh my God.
Just out of curiosity, are they a European pair of glasses by any chance?
I don't know what they are. I mean, I don't know. They just look like glasses to me. But
just use the old tape, tape on the side.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what she's been trying to do. But since she's in school every day in front of kids, and she's got like a headphone on and she's got a mask on, like having the glasses not like quite fitting right doesn't like work so great.
Yeah, that'd be tough.
Yeah, so I think we've reverted to the fact that she actually has to make an appointment and go in and schedule time to go in and visit the person who can like put a new screw in and fix her glasses.
It's interesting. On that same front, I actually last night, maybe the night before, ordered a couple of try-on pairs from Warby Parker. And I'm very excited to see when they get here. I have a eye doctor appointment next month. So
both of my daughters recently got glasses from there.
These glasses are from there, and I'll tell you, they're great. I mean, they're affordable, which is not if you go to an actual conventional store. Right. The glasses are like, I think I've paid with special transition lenses and everything, up to upwards of $500 for a pair of glasses.
Do you have progressive lenses?
No. Transition lenses. So they transition in the sunlight. Yeah. And then anti-glare coating and all that stuff. You get up to like the, $500, $600 range, which, your insurance takes care of a little bit of that. But, Warby Parker, their base set starts at $95. And then if it's maybe like $50 for the transitions and $50 for the anti-glare or whatever, but you're at a much lower price point and you can literally do it from the, your couch, which is awesome.
Before I needed progressive lenses, which I have now, I used to go to $39glasses.com. Yeah. I'd get them like once a year and they worked great. I mean,
I have family members that do that.
$50 and get a set of glasses.
Yeah. I have family members that do the BJ's glasses. They pull them off the rack and just put them in the cart as they're checking out.
Yeah.
I mean, glasses are one of my pet peeves. I mean, the reason why they're so expensive, it's a very cheap piece of glass. It is ground precision, but the reason why they're so expensive is because every glass company in the country pretty much is owned by one mega corporation. Right. And so they just set the prices. Like there's no reason, why glasses, minus the frames, obviously, it's kind of an accessory, but the glasses themselves should just be, $10-15. They're making a killing on it.
I mean, that's one of the benefits of these online services. They're starting to compete in those spaces and drive down the prices, I imagine, a little bit. So before we get on to our main topic today, we recently ran a talking Drupal trivia and gave away a hat. Did you guys submit your answers to that?
It's funny. So I saw the question come out and I was like, oh, that's an easy answer. And then I stopped for a second. I thought about it and I was like, oh yeah, that's an easy answer. And then I really thought about it and I was like, nope. That's
a little twist there, right?
That's a total trick question. I was like, okay, that's interesting.
So what we did is we have a Drupal hat that we purchased from the swag shop, and we're giving it away to a listener. So we posted on social media, on the Drupal Slack channel, hey, here's a trivia question. And the question is, what are the first names of the original show hosts of Talking Drupal? So we put that out there, and then whoever answered the question right went into a raffle, and we do have a winner. It's Mark Eason. So Mark, your hat
Congratulations.
is going to be on its way shortly. The answer to the question is probably hard off the top of your head, but it's super easy if you just go to talkingdrupal.com and look at episode 1. Right?
I did enjoy some of the discussion in Slack. People were trying to figure out if there's a trick question, and I was wondering, like, are they just going to the first episode to watch it? Because like you said, it's not hidden information.
No. So the answer is Stephen, John, Nick, Jason, and Jay, which is the one people would probably forget off the top of their heads.
To be fair, and not overly fair to Jay, I did forget him when I was thinking about the question. I was like, Jason, me, Steve, and Nick. And then I was like, wait a second. No, it wasn't. There were 4 of us.
5 of us.
So
5 of us.
Question for you two guys. How many episodes was Jay on?
I think it was
how many episodes are we on now? Is this 230 what? No.
So I think Jay was on for the first like 15 or 20, and Jason was on for the first 70.
5. I looked yesterday 5? Or the day before. It was like less than 6. I think it was like 5 episodes.
He fit the statistics that, podcasts don't usually get past the 10th episode, right? Podcast
so
hosts.
Thanks to everyone who submitted. That was kind of fun. I'm not sure we can fund this very often, but it was a fun thing to do. And let's move on to our topic for the day.
So in talking about home automation, obviously we all have, kind of different goals when jumping into home automation. And, my idea of home automation, it could be different than some, but let's ask our expert here. Nick, what is home automation to you?
So, I'm very excited about this show, by the way. Home automation.
We're glad we could get you on.
Home automation for the last few years has been, one of my big hobbies. I do a lot of research. I spend a decent amount of time, tweaking my system. Like you said, John, home automation is different for different people, but I would say it's comprised of, a few different things. One is information that you're monitoring, so like maybe that's temperature, things that you can control. So for example, a lot of people control like Spotify with an Echo, and then actual automation. So an automation, very simple automation is, a floodlight with the motion sensor. So when somebody walks across the driveway, the light turns on. That's an automation. And home automation, is kind of a mix of those 2 things. What are you monitoring? What are you controlling? And what kinds of routines do you have set up that just, automatically trigger based on certain factors? I think a lot of people are starting to get more into home automation with the introduction of a bunch of different hubs. But before we talk about that, I wanted to kind of outline a few of the different things that you should consider if you're looking at automating your house. And there's 3 major considerations.
Nick, so before you move on to that, I had a question for you.
Sure.
When you talk about automating your house, are you looking at this from the casual automator? Like, I think I'm in that category, and maybe John, or are you approaching this from the serious automator, which I think is you?
I mean, it's a spectrum. I mean, it's okay. So the things that we'll talk about are things to consider at each level.
Okay.
Now there's certainly things that you can jump into. You can buy, a smart bulb at Best Buy and start automating your home right there. But, the deeper you go, the more time you need to spend planning But home automation, a lot of the pieces aren't cheap. Now, if you're taking that first example I gave, where you have a floodlight and you have a motion sensor on there, that's cheap. I mean, you can buy those motion sensors for $5 or something, put it on the light bulb, and you're good to go. But in general, home automation systems, especially the consumer-ready ones nowadays, they're not cheap, and many times they don't interact with each other very well. So the things that we'll discuss are things to think about, even if you're just dipping your toe in, because you want to kind of be aware of certain considerations, so you don't end up having to switch, all your gear out because some servers stopped working.
All right. So what do you say the major considerations here to get started?
So I think there's three really important ones. I think the first one is, do you want control or automations to be local, or do you want them to be remote? Or is it something you're not concerned about? And what I mean by that is, for me, one of the major things that I always make sure is almost everything that is monitored or controlled in my house is controlled from inside my house. What that means is, if my internet goes out or service goes down, my automations and my systems still work. Now, obviously, there's exceptions to that. Roku's, Netflix isn't going to work if the internet's out there. But most of the automations and systems that are set up in my house are local. Okay. There are systems like Google Home, Smart Things, and we'll get into a couple of others. They're fully remote. Right. And if they can't reach the internet, they don't work. There's also some that do both. I think Habitat is one that they do use a server, but if the internet's not reachable, they have certain routines that are local. And so certain things will still work and others won't. So the first big consideration is, is it a concern for you whether or not you depend on a service?
So in your head, you've decided to do things local. What was a consideration for you in choosing that route?
There were a couple things. One is, I didn't want to have a system that I didn't want to have a house where lights wouldn't work just because the internet was out. Or I wanted a system where I could essentially prevent access to the internet and have it still work. So, one of the other points is security. So for example, I have some security cameras. They're cheap, Chinese-made cameras, and they have notoriously poor security. But I have them set up on a separate VLAN, and they don't have internet access.
All right. So you're not relying on, you're not trusting the vendor in that situation.
Correct. It's kind of the opposite of not trusting. I'm actively distrusting the vendor.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I can still access the cameras from outside my home. I have a VPN, so I can log into the VPN on my home network and view the cameras if I needed to from outside the network. But I'm not even if you're looking at more domestic things, I'm not depending on Google Nest or Amazon servers to be up for me to be able to record or review.
So I think at this point, it's important to interject here and say, throughout the show, you're probably going to get like 3 different levels of the home automation experience, right? You're going to get Nic's level, which is like super nerdy. I have a VPN, I have a VLAN, I have everything like, segmented off of my network. You're going to get me, who's like, literally, I want the least amount of friction. I want like plug and play. If it'll work on my, like with an iPhone app, like I'm probably going to use it. And then, Steven, I think is probably somewhere in the middle of that. Right. So just keep that in mind that you're going to get kind of 3 perspectives on home automation.
Yeah. And they're all perfectly valid. I mean, this isn't, the choices that I made are the choices that I made for myself. I never want to shame somebody for trying to get into home automation. Some of this, it did take me, some time to learn how to set up a VLAN and how to get my cameras working and how to get the VPN working. But, like I said, that part of this for me is a hobby. So some of the challenge of learning that is worthwhile for me.
So Nick, you're saying you are not going to shame John during this episode? Did you just say that?
Second I mention a HomeKit product, I'm pretty sure that I'm getting some shaming. I'm just saying.
Actually,
I mean, come on.
It's funny. HomeKit actually is fairly solid. If I wasn't on the system I'm on, HomeKit is probably where it would be.
Who makes HomeKit though?
Apple.
Oh, whoa! What?
That would be the only Apple product that Nick would ever use.
Because they're fairly security minded as well. Right. But
so let's move. Let's take that segue and move into the hubs.
There's one final consideration I'd like to cover before that. So the first two, like I said, are do you want to be local or remote? Security concerns, and the third one is, which is referred to in the home automation sphere as the WAF, which I feel like should be maybe SAF or something. It stands for a wife acceptance factor. But of course,
not web application firewall for all you nerdy listeners out there.
No, but this is a really good point though.
Yeah. So
sure is.
Now, like I said, it should be maybe significant others acceptance factor, because of course women can also home automate. But WAF means you essentially, when you're doing an automation, you need to do it in a way that people who are not part of your ecosystem or who live with you aren't inconvenienced by it. And there's two really big things that I see mistakes that people make, I think, with this. One is they set up an automation that takes away the ability to control something manually. So for example, one of the common things with this is smart lights. Somebody who put a smart bulb in their kitchen, if you flip the switch off for the smart bulb is no longer smart and doesn't work. So you might have some system where or worse, if it's in the bathroom, somebody's going to go in the bathroom, they're not going to be able, they'll flip the switch, shut off the smart light, and then not be able to have light. That's problematic for people that both live in the house and don't live in the house because they don't know how to use your system. The second thing is sometimes people will set up systems that are very complex. Like, I've seen, one thing that I haven't automated is like lights turning on in the bathroom, because it's very, very difficult to get the correct set of parameters. Like, you can't base it on motion because, if you're taking a shower, the shower curtain is going to be in the way and it's not going to detect motion. You can't base it on the door being open and closed because some people leave the door open when it's unoccupied. Some people close it when it's unoccupied, right? You can't base it on time of day. Like, there's just so many different factors. So you end up in a situation where, every other time somebody's in the restroom brushing their teeth, the lights turn off on them and they have to wave their hand around to get it to turn back on. That
it is one of the most natural places that you walk in, and is a specific place that you expect a switch to be, right?
Exactly.
It's like, it doesn't matter where you are, who you are. How many times have you walked into a bathroom and the switch isn't like where you would naturally expect it, and you can't even get the light on?
Exactly. And this happens even to experienced people. So for example, smart switches, which I'm a huge fan of, they don't flip up or down. They sit in the middle because you can control it both with your home automation system or the switch. So the switch state doesn't actually matter. It's a toggle. Now, for Decor switches, people know how to use them as smart switches or not, because they just hit the top part, light turns on, they hit the bottom part, light goes off. However, normal toggle switches, when they're smart switches, they sit in the middle and it's more obvious. And those confuse people more than anything. And I had, I had one in my bathroom for like a month. The first party, I had some people over 3 times, like people would like flip it up, like, and then hit it again really quickly. So do a double tap. The system would not register as an on, they would register as a double tap and not do anything. So then they'd hit down thinking it was backwards, and it would turn on and then dim all the way down to 1%. And then they just wouldn't know how to. So, so I swapped it out. I swapped it out for a more traditional Decora. Because like I said, it's not just about, your significant other, people living there. Your system should be seamless for people that don't know the automations. Like, they should be able to turn lights on and off. So that's the third kind of major consideration. Do you want to be local or remote? how much do you care about security? And when you're planning automations, do it in such a way that it has the least friction for somebody who doesn't know what the automation is.
So at the center of every system, there is a hub, right?
Yeah. So the first big purchase that you'll make, like I said, you might get a smart bulb or a smart switch or a smart outlet or something, but the first big purchase you're going to make when you start integrating things is your hub. I like to describe the hub as it's a device that collates all the information in the system, manages the automation routines, and displays the relevant information to you in a way that makes sense, allows you to set up dashboards, so to speak. There are a bunch of them.
Right.
I think the big three, the ones that most people are familiar with are the Google Homes, the Amazon Echoes, and the Apple HomeKits. I think those are probably, the most, most purchased.
Are these physical things?
Yeah.
I think it depends.
I believe they all are.
I think it depends on which ecosystem you're in.
Yeah.
So Google Home does have an iPhone app that you can use, but typically the home itself is a device, right? The Amazon Echo also is a device, and then
a bunch of devices.
And then, right, it can be a bunch of devices. And then Apple's HomeKit is both an app on your phone, but in some instances, if you want to do home automation, you need an Apple TV or I'm doing air quotes, home iPad, a device that does not leave the home in order to do certain automation steps.
And then there's a few others I'll just mention so that if people are looking for recommendations or possibilities, Samsung SmartThings has one as well. And I think their hardware just got purchased. They just sold that portion of the business. HomeSeer is the company. I believe that they have hardware as well as software. Habitat, which I think does local control. There are also a couple of proprietary systems, but they are extraordinarily expensive. Control 4 and Savant, both of them have been doing home automation and I believe industrial automation for many, many years. But you're looking at high five figures and up to get one of those systems installed. It's a professional. You talk with a dealer and they do the install. And there's two kind of really big open source projects. One of them is Home Assistant, which is the one that I use, and the other is OpenHab. Both of them are just programs and you install them somewhere. They both have a robust community. I started with Home Assistant on a Raspberry Pi. I very quickly migrated that to just a dedicated server, just so that it would kind of run a little bit quicker. But Home Assistant is one of the top 10 projects on GitHub right now for open source. It is extremely quick moving. There's updates. I think there's an update once a month. And they support an extraordinarily wide variety of devices and systems.
So I was just going to ask you that. So you got a hub and like you say, you're using Home Assistant. Does that mean it works with, how do you know it works with the other things that you have? Like I assume that you need to get to some level of having things all talk together. How does that?
So Home Assistant, so that's what the hub does. Home Assistant manages the cross-pollination. So Home Assistant, when I started with it, usually you had to use a YAML file. Everything was YAML. So you had to configure everything. So you'd say like, I want to integrate this media service, like Roku, for example, and you'd have to tell it, this is the IP address, this is that, et cetera, et cetera. And over the last 6 months or so, they've really been moving towards 1.0. They've been moving towards just having UI-based integrations. And so it knows that Roku's listed on port, I don't know, I think it's like 5500 or something. There's some port that Roku advertises itself. And so it just picks up your Roku's on the system and you can tell it to integrate or not. Same thing with most Z-Wave devices. If you include a Z-Wave device into your controller, then Home Assistant will pick it up and tell you what capabilities it has.
So essentially, Home Assistant has basically a library of like integrations that it can go and access, right? Like and say like
a significant library.
Hey, it's a Z-Wave device. Hey, it's a Hue device. Hey, it's this device, that device, and I can just kind of go and connect with that using that library, right? Okay.
Now
you said Z-Wave. You lost me on Z-Wave.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about the different protocols in a moment, but Z-Wave, Zigbee, Wi-Fi, they're just ways for things to communicate. You do need a separate device to listen to it. So like it needs to have like an antenna essentially to listen to it. But Home Assistant can communicate with the protocol as long as you have that device. The one other thing that I do integrate with Home Assistant myself, though, also is something called Node-RED. And Node-RED is a JavaScript, a node-based logic controller. So I generally treat Home Assistant more as the dashboard and the hub that manages communication. But when I need to do logic and automations, I actually run those in Node-RED.
So it's like
just because
scripting language for it.
Yeah, but it also has a nice UI. But the thing is, things like doing a loop or if else logic is just much easier with Node-RED than it is with Home Assistant. And they integrate perfectly with each other. So you add a device to Home Assistant, it automatically is available in Node-RED. So you can say something like
software application.
Yep. Yeah, I run both of them in Docker on my home network. So yeah, when you're looking at a hub, there's a couple of considerations. One, the three big considerations for a hub really quickly is cost. Each of them has a different price point. Which services they'll integrate with. So for example, Samsung will communicate with Zigbee and Z-Wave, but other hubs won't. I don't believe Google Homes communicate with Z-Wave. And then you have to look at whether or not the company behind it will support it long term. So for example, Google Home, many people would look at that and say, hey, it's Google, it's going to be around for a long time. But the truth is Google drops their hardware support very, very quickly. 2 years ago, they purchased Revolve, which was a home automation hub, and they killed it within 6 months. They just dropped Nest API support 2 weeks ago, I think. It caused quite an uproar in the home automation world.
It's actually interesting you mentioned that, because my Nest has, every time I open the Nest app, it actually has asked me to switch to a Google account from a Nest account, which is kind of annoying, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah. So you really you want to consider, what devices it will talk to, how much it will cost, and whether or not the company will be reliable and be around. Like Samsung SmartThings, I see posts on the forums maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Their system goes down and everybody's automations don't work for 5 or 6 hours, and then they come back. And sometimes the automations are deleted and they have to add them all again. Sometimes they just start back up again. So that's another one of the reasons why I decided to do everything locally. Because if something breaks, it's because I did something wrong, not because some server in Korea stopped working. So the next thing, I kind of hinted at this, is the different protocols. So there's a bunch of them, but the protocols are just really how do the different devices talk to each other. When you're looking at wireless devices, there's 3 main protocols that you can consider. One is Zigbee, one is Z-Wave, and one is Wi-Fi. So it really just means how does the device communicate with others? There are a few other wireless protocols, but they're mostly proprietary and they only work with one device. But really quick overview of the 3 options with Zigbee, Z-Wave, and Wi-Fi. Zigbee is the same frequency as Wi-Fi, so you can still get some interference if you have a lot of Wi-Fi devices between Zigbee and Wi-Fi. But Zigbee is a mesh, which means that if you have Zigbee devices in a chain, they can communicate through each other.
Right.
And Zigbee has a very high limit of how many they can communicate through. So, if they're spread out as far as they can be, Zigbee, I think, can communicate through 20 or 30 items, and they can get much, much further, and their power usage is lower than Wi-Fi. Okay. So, for example, a lot of industrial automation things like fire control systems that states use will be Zigbee, because their radio they'll spread out, miles. I think, for example, a lot of signs that you see on the highway that are electronic, a lot of those use Zigbee because they can communicate that way. Z-Wave is similar to Zigbee in that it's a mesh, but it's much lower power because it's a lower frequency. It's 900 megahertz in the US. And it can mesh up to 4 items and it can reach 300 feet. But it has a much lower limit of the number of devices you can have too. So I think you can only have 256 Z-Wave items on a network. Whereas Zigbee, you can have, I think, 60,000 plus. But because it's a different frequency, it will never interfere with Wi-Fi. It just can't. And it's a lower frequency, so it goes through walls better. I've never had a communication problem with Z-Wave. And the third option is, the third option is Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi is what everybody knows and loves is Wi-Fi. The main problem with Wi-Fi is it's very high power. So battery devices generally don't exist, or the batteries die very, very quickly. It also has a problem that there's interference. Everybody, like if I look at my 2.4 gigahertz wave frequency, I can see, 20 routers in my area.
Right.
So when you start adding smart switches, you have 20 switches in your house, that's 20 devices. Most people's routers and access points can't handle, 50 or 60 devices on their router.
Nick, when I walk into a Best Buy, they all have, and a lot of stores have home automation sections now.
Yep.
I'm not seeing, unless I just don't see them because I'm not familiar with them. I don't see things that say Zigbee and Z-Wave on them. I see labels that say Google, it supports Google Home, whatever, and it supports Home Assistant. I see like those brands as things they support. How do you know that a device supports these protocols? And do you pick one protocol for your network? So
that's your personal choice on whether or not you're going to choose one protocol or not.
Okay.
I've done the majority of my items Z-Wave because it's lowest power. It's going to
So are those items that you walk into Best Buy and purchase, or are those items that you're not purchasing at a place like that? It's because you need to go to a place that sells Z-Wave and it's an online purchase thing.
It depends. Some things you have to check to see if they support Z-Wave or Zigbee or Wi-Fi. Like for example, a lot of locks will support Z-Wave. So I got my locks at Lowe's.
Okay.
And they're Z-Wave. I can get a lot of switches and things like that at like Lowe's or Home Depot that are Z-Wave, right. But devices like temperature, humidity sensors, those kinds of things, usually I'm buying online.
So you've chosen a protocol. You're using Z-Wave as your protocol.
Yeah, and one of the reasons, aside from the fact that it doesn't interfere with Wi-Fi, one of the reasons I also went with that is the Z-Wave. The company that manages Z-Wave is much more strict about its certification, which means that if you have a Z-Wave device, you're almost guaranteed that it will work with any hub. Now, the hub has to support it, so it might lag a little bit, but almost every Z-Wave device will work with any Z-Wave network. Zigbee, on the other hand, says it's an open protocol. Anybody can do whatever they want. So you can have 2 Zigbee devices and they won't be able to communicate with each other or with the hub, because Zigbee literally is just the Wi-Fi frequency, but anybody can implement it however they want.
Okay, gotcha. Right. So the Z-Wave certification process helps you have a more reliable devices that will work together. Okay.
Now the
I would
downside
also
is
say-
they're pricier. So like you can get a Wi-Fi switch for 20, 25 bucks.
Yep.
A Z-Wave switch is going to be $40. Well, actually with the tariffs now, they're $50. They're pricey.
Okay.
But their support also is rock solid. I had one device from Leviton that failed. Like it kept dropping off the network. I said before, I've never had a communication issue. That's actually not true. One time I did. I emailed Leviton support and said, hey, I'm having this issue. They mailed me a second Z-Wave dongle so I could connect to it and update the firmware on all my switches over the air. And when it dropped again, they immediately shipped me a new device. Like they didn't even check my receipt. I bought it from Lowe's or Home Depot or something. Like they just shipped me a brand new one to replace it. So like the support generally on the hardware side is very, very good.
As we start to talk about like these devices all on a frequency and a protocol, what kind of security issues do you have to be careful of?
So that's one of the things
seems like,
too.
like one of the biggest issues in my mind with home automation is always security.
Yeah. So this is one of the interesting things. So Wi-Fi security in home automation is notoriously abysmal. Wi-Fi devices you can pretty much control just if you get on the network, and it's super easy to get on somebody's network. It doesn't matter if you have a password or not. 2.4 gigahertz is very easy generally to get on.
Yeah.
Z-Wave, you can do encrypted connections. So like, for example, my locks are both encrypted. In fact, you can't even do an unencrypted connection to a lock. So nobody can control my locks, even if they somehow connected to the Z-Wave network. Now, there is added overhead to have an encrypted system. So I only encrypt the things I need to. Somebody could connect to my Z-Wave network and turn a light on or off. But
and check if your laundry's done yet, right?
Yeah, that kind of thing. But I'm not super concerned. I'm not super concerned about that. I mean, people are snooping on Wi-Fi networks. Nobody's snooping on 900 megahertz. Most people don't even know what Z-Wave is. So it's not something that really concerned me.
So what are there any other concerns with security?
I mean, I think the biggest one is Wi-Fi devices. So any Wi-Fi device you have, I put on the four big Wi-Fi devices I have are my cameras. Oh, actually, those aren't technically Wi-Fi; they're hardwired. But cameras. I have some remote controls, so I can control my ACs and my TVs and things. Yeah. I have a Roomba, and I have Ecobees, right. And I put those on their own VLAN so that they can't be accessed.
And to be clear, Nick, the locks, right, and the encrypted connection, that's not something that's they're coming out of the box that way, right? That's something specifically you're doing to
they come out of the box.
Secure them.
They come out of the box like that. You need to provide a network key, and you cannot add locks to an unencrypted Z-Wave network connection. You have to encrypt it. The other good thing about this is generally locks, especially ones that you buy at Lowe's, are theater. Like somebody who's trying to get into a house with a cheap lock, like it'll take them less than 30 seconds to break in. But Z-Wave locks, companies invest a lot more into the cylinders. And if you lock yourself out with one of those because the battery died and you didn't replace it or something, they generally have to drill it. Like you're not getting in, like they can't pick them. So it's actually a more secure device.
Welcome back. Well, we didn't really leave for you guys. We just left for us. So we started to record this episode 5 days ago. And we recorded an hour of content, and we were halfway through, and we couldn't finish. So we're picking this up on this day, and going to finish talking about home automation with Nick. So
and his dog, who's very excited.
And his
about
dog.
Home automation.
So if you're watching a video, you can see I think we're all dressed differently. I'm not really sure.
I was tempted to put the NASA sweatshirt back on, for continuity's sake, but
I actually think
My
I
house is
had
a little
the
warm.
same sweatshirt on.
ver-
I'm not sure.
I very much am wearing different clothes, and I've
That's
developed
right.
a head cold. So
Oh, that's right.
listeners will notice.
So what's happened between these between the last recording and this recording? One is today's election day in the U.S., which is an interesting day for us here. And more importantly, since last episode and this episode, I installed and I'm using Home Assistant.
I don't know if it's more important, but it's more
It
relevant.
is way more important in terms of this episode.
Okay. Well, fair enough.
I'm very excited to hear what you think about it so far.
So this is what I think about it. It is I think I texted this to you guys. I slacked it to you. This is like the perfect storm of nerdom, because it's like, it's got Linux, it's got tinkering with scripts, it's got my like Raspberry Pi, and it's got like issues, like things that I can like that break, and I can do research and figure them out. So to me, it's like, it's like a perfect soup to me of all the things that I like am interested in and I play with and I use. So prior to last episode 5 days ago, I have a few home automations. I use like Philips Hue lights, and I control them through HomeKit, through Apple. And I have lights that turn on and off in my house, and Christmas lights and things like that. So since then, like, I installed Home Assistant on a Raspberry Pi. I deleted all those automations that I had in those other services, and I'm now controlling those things that I had before through Home Assistant. So I haven't improved anything. I've only doing it differently now. But it was interesting to see the things Nick was talking about last week. I could see I have a better feel for it now. And I've actually ordered a couple of more products that are coming in a few days to do, a motion sensor and some other additional stuff. So it was really interesting. And I'm glad we did that little push last week to get me looking at this stuff. And it's like right in my zone of tinkering.
Yeah, Home Assistant's great. As I mentioned kind of at the top of the show, it's got a lot of momentum. It's an open source project. It's consistently in the top 10 most contributed to projects. There's a company behind it now. The guy that started it he was hired by Ubiquiti actually for a year to maintain Home Assistant. So they basically just funded Home Assistant development. And then I think 2 years ago, maybe, he split off and started his own company called Nabukasa. And I think there's 2 or 3 guys now on, and what they provide is, and it's completely voluntary, but if you pay for the service, I think it's $5 a month, so it's incredibly cheap, is they provide Alexa integration and Google Home integration, as well as they provide DNS so that you can access it from outside your network securely.
So I turn that on, and I get like a 30-day trial. It allows me now, because we use an Alexa in the house. We mostly use it to get to the radio, like to listen to stuff. And I've installed that product.
Oh, nice.
Subscribe to it for 30 days, and I can control my lights and my automations through Alexa, which I was previously doing with HomeKit through Siri, but it was much more of a pain.
Yeah. And now,
can you dig into that a little bit? Why was Siri a pain?
So it was only a pain because Alexa, we just talk and it works, right? You say Alexa and it works. With Siri, you have to have your phone with you. You have to like push a button on your watch or talk to your watch. And it required that you need to have an Apple device with you for it to work, which isn't necessarily always the case here.
So, I mean, you have to have an Alexa with you for it to work,
No,
right?
you have the Alexa in the house.
Well, right.
Right?
So
Because I don't have an Apple like device.
I guess what I'm saying is I have like Hey Siri set up, which
with your devices, right?
But
if
Yeah, but
someone
my iPad just went bonkers.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so if you walk into your house, unless you have like the Apple like home device, you can't just talk.
true. Yep.
Right? That's a difference because I don't have that device.
I mean, the flip side of that is I always have my phone in my pocket, so it's either I'm voice activating Siri or I'm pulling my phone out and going like doot, doot,
yeah, totally get it. So and I would like to be like I'd like to be non-Apple specific. I'd like to be non-Alexa specific, and I can. It looks like through Home Assistant, through the research in the stuff that I basically spent probably 10 hours in the weekend playing with this stuff. Thank you, Nick. There is a voice solution that's part of Home Assistant, which is what I would look at in the future. This was like a stepping stone for me.
Yeah, there's one more point I want to make about this too. The features that the paid plan provide are you're also able to do them yourself. So you just have to integrate them yourself. You have to figure out how to set the skill yourself. You have to figure it's not like you can't do it unless you pay. It's just that paying makes it a little bit more seamless, and it supports the company. It's actually, I've been meaning to start paying for it, even though I don't plan on using either of those two services myself.
Development,
yeah, because like I said, they develop things faster than any project I've ever seen in my life.
So
it's pretty impressive.
So you guys have nerded out quite a bit on the technical aspects of this. I'm kind of interested in the like practical aspects, right? Like how are we using these things? How are we kind of like putting these things to work to make our lives easier? And Nick actually classifies like the home automation sphere into like 3 specific areas, right? Monitoring, control, and automation. Nick, can you describe that a little bit?
Before you go there, John, though, I want to just say one thing is that
we're going back.
Sorry. Yeah. I'm going to
Home Assistant
back in. Yep.
Here we go. What do you got?
Draw you back in for 1 second is that the amount of nerdity for me to get this running was really small. I haven't done any scripting. I haven't done anything other than installing something on a Raspberry Pi. This could have been installed on any computer,
which is kind of a high level of nerdity, isn't it?
No, well, it is, but I decided to put it on a Raspberry Pi. I could have put it on anything, including if I read the documentation properly, I could have installed it on an iPad and it would still have worked the same way. I didn't try to do that. Is that right, Nick?
I'm not sure about that last bit. I mean, you can install it. You can install it like on a Mac, a Mini. You can install it on any computer, pretty much.
It works on it. I think so. We're
it may. I don't look at that.
I have an iOS device that I installed the app on, and I'm able to control and configure everything.
Yes.
I don't think I needed to install anything on the Raspberry Pi for this to work. I don't think there's any difference.
The app, I think, is just an interface to the back end. So I think you do need to have it installed somewhere.
So I could be wrong. So all right, John. So there is a little bit of nerdity here, but once I installed the thing, and it was like super simple instructions, it was about 10 minutes that had it up and running on the Raspberry Pi because I know how to use a Raspberry Pi. But then it just discovered everything in my house, and I could then start configuring stuff through the UI. I haven't done anything like anything super like configuration files or YAML files. I can see that I need to do that and can do that moving forward, but I haven't done that yet.
Okay, you drew me back in. I have one more question. You said it found everything in your house that you had, right?
Yep.
Was there any need for you to install additional plugins or anything like that for devices, or was everything was just there and ready to go?
Yeah, everything was there that I could configure by default. For me, it's very limited. I have Hue lights. So the stuff that I was controlling from the Apple side, I immediately got in this tool. And I had all my automations running in a few minutes.
interesting.
Yeah, for most devices, not to turn this into the Home Assistant show, but most devices and things nowadays, now Home Assistant will just auto-discover. There are plugins. Plugins generally fall into two categories. One is something really complex that the community itself isn't supporting and somebody is kind of supporting the side. For example, floor plan is a way that you can generate an SVG floor plan of your house and put little SVG icons of different things in there and have it control things or report status. So like I have a floor plan installed. It has every light in my house on there. I click on the SVG and it turns the light on or off. When my fan is running, the fan icon in the SVG is spinning. And I generated that floor plan. Like I built it. That's a plugin. The other category is like small UX improvements. So like you can control your Roku through Home Assistant by default, but there's a plugin that somebody created that gives you kind of a Roku remote. So you can put you have the remote on a page and you can control it. It looks exactly like the Roku remote, like same buttons and everything. So you can control it that way without having to like go into the component. So there are plugins, but yeah, like Roku will get added automatically as well. I believe you don't have to do anything.
Okay. So Home Assistant sounds pretty awesome. But let's move into the practical use cases, right? What are we using this stuff for? Nick, you classify this as three areas. Again, monitoring, control, and automation. Can you talk a little bit about each one of those?
Yeah. So a lot of people, when they think of home automation, they think, oh, I'm automating my house. I got a smart light. I tell my assistant of choice to turn the light on in the living room. I've automated things. And that's not necessarily the case. So monitoring is what it sounds like. It's monitoring data. There's a bunch of different examples. I'll give it a moment, but it's things like temperature, humidity, status of a particular device, whether it's on or off. Control is when you have to interact with something to do something. For example, you have to click a button to turn a light on or off. Voice control is still control as well. Like having to tell something, turn this on is still a remote. It's just not, a physical remote that you have to press. Right. And finally, the third thing is automation. And this is they can range from very simple to very complex. But you have to have really a solid foundation of monitoring points and control points before you can truly start to automate things. Automations in my book are things that you eventually forget that they happen, that you have them. They're the type of thing where things just happen automatically, as the name sounds. So for example, I have a speaker system that I've set up, and one of the speakers is outdoors. And one of the automations I have is if it's after 10 p.m., it shuts off the outdoor speaker. So in case I forget to shut it off, I don't want to annoy my neighbor by having not that it's loud enough ever that it would, wake him up. But I wouldn't want my speaker going
his death
at night.
metal mix. He doesn't want his neighbor to be upset.
Yeah. So that's one of the automations that I have. I also have one where if you ring the doorbell and it's after sunset, the porch light turns on, or the driveway light turns on automatically. So, it's something that, it's reacting to something that somebody did, but it's different than just flipping a switch. It's different than a control.
So Nick, just to make sure I'm clear on this, like let's take a Nest thermostat, right? A Nest thermostat's kind of covering all three of these areas where it's kind of monitoring the temperature inside your house and the movement and whatnot. And then obviously you have the physical control of being able to turn up or down your heat, or from your phone, turn up or down your heat. And then, ultimately you have the automation of the thermostat kind of figuring out what your schedule is and automatically turning the heat on when it thinks it should. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah. I mean, I would say the automatic scheduling is actually less of an automation, more of machine learning, like determining, how to set things. The automation is it detecting that there's no occupancy. So it's setting the lower set point. But the lines are a little bit blurry there. I would say that those types of smart thermostats are probably the closest that most people get when they're first starting to look at automations. That's one of the closest things that they get to true automation, though. That's a pretty good point.
Cool.
So I think we've spent enough time talking about Home Assistant probably so far on the show, but I just want to mention really quickly. I obviously use Home Assistant myself. I have it set up running on an Intel NUC, which is just like a really small server, and it's running in Docker. So it's really nice and easy for me to run upgrades or roll back updates, although I've never actually had to roll back an update. And, it just puts any data. I actually feed the data into an influx database so I can kind of graph things out if I want to. But it's pretty straightforward. When I first started on it, it was very much, manually setting things up, and now it's a lot smoother.
I found the documentation super easy based on even where you're going to install it, what kind of computer you're installing it on. It was super easy to follow to get it up and running.
Wait a second. Have you guys tricked me into talking about Home Assistant more?
we can move on. So I think the next part of the show, we'll take the three different things, monitoring, controlling, and automation, and just I'll start by kind of going through and mentioning all the things that I do in my own system, and then you guys can obviously chime in with how they're doing. So I monitor a lot of data in my house. The first two things that are kind of the primary things are switch status, so I can see which lights are on, which lights are off in the house. It also monitors dimming states. So if it's a dimmer, it'll tell me if it's
Nick, do you have all of your switches connected to are you collecting data for all of your switches? Like what is your balance between understanding, like changing out switches for the things you care about and leaving traditional switches for things that you don't care about? Where are you in that model?
So at this point, I have swapped every single switch on my first floor except for Kitako's groaning. I think he's a little bored of this conversation. At this point, I've switched out every switch on my first floor except for I have a low voltage LED under cabinet light system.
Okay.
And the smart switch for that is extraordinarily expensive. So I haven't spent that money. And then downstairs, I've only actually changed one switch out at this point. Okay. But every switch on my first floor, including all my fans, are smart switches at this point. One of the nice things about that is, I can set up we'll talk about it a bit, but a semi going away automation that can just shut off every light in the house, and I don't have to, run around
or randomly turn lights on to make it look like you're still home.
Yep. Yeah, we can do that too. The next thing that I monitor is lock status. So I have 2 smart locks on the house, and so I can, make sure that they're locked at night.
Schlage locks, or are you using something else?
Schlage. Schlage are the ones that I could find that had a keyway as well as a keypad. So I wanted to have a keypad outside so I could just key in and unlock it. And I also, if the battery died, I wanted to be able to use a key, a traditional key. And those are some of the ones those are some of the only ones I could find that really did that. And they had to be Z-Wave because I wanted it to be secure. As I mentioned, I have a speaker system. So there's 2 parts to that. I have some Sonoses. So those integrate directly with Home Assistant. But I also have a monoprice 6-zone amp, and that will also connect. So what the 6-zone amp is it can have 6 inputs and 6 outputs, and you can assign any input to any output, any combination of outputs. And so I can monitor what inputs are playing and which rooms it's playing in. I also monitor temperature in many different ways. I have ecobees to control for my thermostats, but I also have Z-Wave temperature sensors. I have some 433 megahertz temperature sensors. the more traditional like Accurate tower ones. And I've got a radio dongle that can monitor that. And I think, John, you have a Nest, right?
I actually have two of them. So I have just Nest thermostats. We put them in a while back. So they're like first gen Nest thermostats, which is, super nice, super easy for like the person that's not jumping into Home Assistant. They have an app on iOS devices. You can set your temperature. You can even do like, they call it Home Away Assist. Basically, it'll use your phone's location to say like, hey, all the phones are out of the house. So that coupled with like the motion sensor data means that nobody's home. So let's turn off the thermostats or lower the thermostats, I should say. Although I will say in the latest update, I think that feature has broken, or I'm having some sort of issue with it because my thermostats aren't switching, but that's more likely a me issue than a them issue. But yeah, overall, I think if I were going to go out and buy new thermostats right now, I might look at the Ecobees because, as I understand it, and Nick, you having them, you can probably correct me on this, but the Ecobees have like basically like remote bases that you can set up in rooms, so that way it basically knows better what the overall temperature is in other rooms of your house. So, for example.
Interesting.
For example,
that's like a monitor.
Yeah. So I'm showing one to the camera for people watching the video. Yeah. I mean, that's why I chose the Ecobee, because it has these little things. It runs on, the CR232 batteries. And this monitors temperature, humidity, and occupancy.
So the like prime example for that, right, is on our second floor. The thermostat is in our master bedroom. So if we close our master bedroom door, the thermostat heats up to, 68 degrees or whatever it's supposed to be set at. But the other rooms in the house might actually be colder, and it has no way of knowing that because the door to the master bedroom's closed, and it's basically, saying, hey, I reached temperature, I'm going to shut off. As where if it had that input data from the other rooms to say, hey, this room's actually only 67 degrees, keep running for a little bit, it would heat the house more evenly.
It also will. The other nice thing about Ecobee is it will also average the temperatures, so that one room doesn't get to 90 and the other room is cold. It also, I'm sure Nest does this too. We had an issue with our heat maybe a year and a half ago, and I got an email saying, hey, we've been calling for heat for 4 hours. The temperature hasn't gone up yet. You might want to check into what's going on.
Interesting.
And I'm sure the Nest does that as well. Okay. Moving on. Other things I monitor: humidity and occupancy. So I use pretty much the same set of devices to do that. They'll tell me, like, I have a humidity sensor in the attic just to see what the humidity is up there. I have one outside to tell me what the outside is. I monitor weather.
For what purpose?
Because I can.
Okay. All right.
I mean, the attic one was partially because we had a roof vent put in and full soffits put in. And I wanted to see how much of a temperature change that made. That was kind of the beginning impetus for that one. The outside one, I monitor the weather in general, and I was just curious, how far off, I think I used dark sky. I was just curious how far off dark sky was for Worcester versus, outside my house. I also monitor security cameras. So, Home Assistant doesn't do it in the recording or motion detection and that kind of stuff, but I can view my cameras directly in the Home Assistant app. If they're equipped to do motion sensing, they'll report that data. So if some of them have IR, they'll detect if somebody is walking in front of it or something's walking in front of it.
So what security cameras do you have?
I have a few different ones. I have mostly Amcrest ones.
Yeah.
Because they were on the cheaper set.
To a security camera system.
Yeah.
That's outside of this.
Yep. Okay. And then they just feed directly into one of the streams feed into Home Assistant.
So what is Home Assistant giving you for this? That's what I'm not clear about.
It's just if I want to view the security system, I have to log in to the account and then open the security app and then say which camera I want to look at.
Yep.
With Home Assistant, I just go to the security camera tab and they're all on a dashboard right there. And I can immediately,
Okay.
so like if we hear something outside, it takes us 2 seconds to pull up the Home Assistant app and just switch that tab and see what's going on outside.
So you're not doing things like there's activity outside, trigger the lights to turn on, or do any automations based on activity there?
I could, because like I said, the cameras themselves will report status, like they'll report motion.
Yeah.
And so I could say, if this camera detects motion, turn this light on. But the truth is, most cameras, motion detection is really awful.
Okay.
Unless you're using stuff like things like Ring will have better motion detection, but you're at the expense of your personal privacy. So
one of the things that I've, in my only couple of hours of playing with Home Assistant, I could see the value of it being that it brings all these things together that you're using.
Yeah.
And that you can have them work together. So like if my washer and dryer is finished, I could have it talk to Alexa and say, hey, the dryer is done.
Yep.
Like I see it like bringing the ability of bringing those things together. Like
even if they're completely different ecosystems.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So like one is the LG system. The other one is, the Alexa system, but I could tie those things together, which is where I saw the power of what Home Assistant and other tools like that could bring to you.
Yep. Yeah. It's that, that's the power of the hub.
Right.
Security system.
Yeah, so I have actually not here, but I have at my mom's house. I installed for her a Ring security system, which super easy. So if you're not going the Home Assistant route, and you can kind of like come to grips with Ring's corporate policies. Ring makes it super easy to set up a security system, integrate that with Doorbell. We're going to talk about doorbells in a little bit. And then they even have floodlights with cameras on them. So you can monitor your whole house. They have monitoring set up and all that stuff, so they can call the police and fire department. They even have carbon monoxide. So it's a pretty full system to be able to monitor your house. And in most cases, cheaper than a conventional like ADT system. Not so much to install, but for monthly or yearly monitoring and things like that.
Yep. I also do a lot of power monitoring in my house. So for example, I've got some Z-Wave outlets behind the TVs so I can know when the TVs are powered on. Because one of the things that you'll learn is things like getting a remote system set up to turn the TV on is all great and good. But if your system has no way of knowing if the TV was actually on, it doesn't know if it has to retry turning it on. Or if you have an automation that says, hey, put the TV on and switch it to this channel. If the TV is already on and it starts and it hits the power button, that's just turning the TV off. But if you have some power monitoring, you can know, the TV's already on. I can skip the step of, hitting the power button.
So Nick, going back to the question, you have switched out all of the switches on your first floor. Have you switched out all of the plugs on your first
Absolutely
floor?
Not.
Okay.
I don't have that kind of money.
So you stick the Z-Wave device on the outlets that you want to monitor.
No. So actually that's not the case. Because because there's two different Z-Wave outlets. Essentially, there's one like it's a wall wart. Like you plug it in and it'll monitor power. You can turn on and off. Those are usually pretty bulky, and in a lot of places you don't want to use them. I have a couple of those because they're good for portability. Like we use one for one of the bedroom lamps. Use one downstairs for some things.
It actually plugs into the outlet. Is that what
you're saying? Yeah. It's basically like it looks like a charger almost.
Gotcha.
You plug it into the wall and then you plug something into it. Yep.
I have some of those as well. Yeah.
There's also built-in outlets, so they can handle a little bit higher load, but most of those don't do power monitoring. Actually, they're essentially switches. They allow you to turn the switch on or off. And you can but you can't see, it doesn't tell you if the device is pulling load. So like if you had like a lamp in, you could turn the lamp off by turning the switch off, but it wouldn't tell you if the lamp was turned on or off.
Right.
But I found a couple that do power monitoring, and so I use those for the TVs. They'll tell me if how much wattage the TVs are using, so I can detect if they're on or off. I also have a heavy duty power monitor for my dryer, so I can know how much power it's using. I have a whole home energy monitor, so it'll tell me how much the whole house is using. And then I have another whole home energy monitor that I've split. I have 2 mini splits for my ACs, and I just use one leg for each of those mini splits, so I can know when the mini splits are on as well. Most people don't do as much power monitoring as I do, but the big devices that I control, like I said, if the AC, it's no good to tell your system, hey, if it's 80 degrees, turn the AC on, if the system has no way of knowing if the AC is already on, because otherwise it'll hit 85 degrees. Automation will, like if you turn it on manually, then it hits 85 right after, the system's going to go, oh, I need to turn it on. It's going to hit the button and it's going to turn it off. And now your AC is off. What else do I monitor? I monitor coronavirus. So one of the tabs of my Home Assistant page is just an iframe for the world meter. So it's easy for me I can just easily see it on my phone. I don't have to find it. So
you're not doing like air particle.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John.
I was just gonna say, so you're not doing like air particle analysis. No. You're talking about just the data that's out in the world.
Yep, exactly.
But if it reaches a certain rate, you lock the doors.
I could do that.
Right.
I don't. And then just really quickly, I also monitor server status. So tell me how much CPU usage there is, what kind of RAM I'm using. I have a UPS, so the backup battery power supply. It'll tell me how much time is remaining on that. I monitor my network storage, so it'll tell me how much much space I have left for saving things. I have a couple of Z-Wave doorbells. So like one of the nice things about that, like I said, is when somebody rings the bell, my system can now act on that information.
Makes me kind of wonder how much power you're saving by not having your front door light on all the time. Because like I look at my house, right, and I have light switches that are not Wi-Fi enabled, not smart switches. They're just like basic timer switches that, light goes on at 5 o'clock and shuts off at, 12 o'clock or whatever. And like those things just go, they're on for like, 6 hours or whatever it is every night. And I wonder by using that, doorbell system or motion system, like how much power is being saved there? Probably quite a bit, but
probably not. And
okay.
The truth is probably one smart switch will take you years to pay off the power usage. Exactly. Yeah. Because like a normal house outlet, for example, is going to be $1.10. I mean just the outlet itself, like buying the device is going to be like $1.10. The smart outlet that I use to monitor my TVs was the cheapest that I've ever found, and it was $35 for 2.
You said sorry, I was going back to your doorbells. You say you have Z-Wave doorbells. Yep. Do those have cameras in them, or are they just kind of like doorbells?
No, so it's just a doorbell, but I do have an Ubiquity camera so I essentially have a video doorbell, but it's a doorbell and a camera separate, side by side.
So what does the doorbell do as
it rings
Z-Wave
rings? Oh, it just connects to the Z-Wave network. So it's got really good battery life.
It's just a Wi-Fi enabled doorbell, Steve. That's it.
Essentially, except it's hooked into the system. So when you hit it, I can have it. One of the things I want to do with it that I haven't done yet, for example, is if the doorbell rings, I want it to, because sometimes I don't hear it because I have noise canceling headphones on. So I want it to flash the lights. No, just flash the lights in the office to let me know
I'm
like somebody's at the
picturing
door.
a big hammer dropping down and hitting the guy on the top.
Well,
on the top
I was
of the
gonna
head.
say when somebody rings the doorbell, they get sprayed after 10 o'clock. They get sprayed in the face with pepper spray.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Laflins. Okay, so taking the non super nerdy approach, I actually for Christmas last year got a Ring doorbell, and I'll tell you, it's pretty awesome. Again, if you can get past their corporate governance, it does pretty much everything you would expect a doorbell with a camera to do. It monitors my front yard. Does have the ability, as Nick was saying, to instead of doing motion detection, I live in the woods. There are a lot of animals. It can do like people detection. So if there was a person in my front yard, I could turn on like, hey, there's a person in my front yard, turn on the camera, as opposed to right now I have it set to just turn on for motion. So sometimes like a cat will walk by and it'll turn on, or if I have the front door lights on and it's a particularly mothy night, sometimes I'll get a pretty good shot of some moths. But I will say overall, they just actually launched notifications that you can actually get pictures of your camera inside your iOS notifications. So that's pretty exciting. The last thing I'll say that I kind of monitor is my generator. So I have a generator, backup generator, and it's Wi-Fi enabled. And if you buy the service from Generac, you can actually monitor the maintenance schedule. You can monitor if the generator's on or off, what the status of the generator is. So that's pretty useful in the fact that like you're not always thinking like, hey, the power's going to go out, or like, hey, my generator might not work, and being able to monitor it and say, have it pop up with a notification like, hey, I need service if you want me to work the next time I'm needed.
Yeah,
that's pretty important.
Yeah, I could see the utility of that.
So I have a question about the things that we monitor. So if I have a bunch of Philips Hue lights, and I have a hub, because that's like a Christmas gift I got like 3 years ago from my kids. So it's the first time I get into this. Do I need the hub to control the lights if I have something like Home Assistant? Or can I use Home Assistant and not have the hub?
I'm pretty sure you need the hub, don't you? Because
it depends.
That's my question.
No, it depends on the system. So like, for example, I think for Philips Hue, you can emulate the hub in Home Assistant and get around it. I think for like light effects, for example, you can, but you have to flash the firmware on the bulbs.
Oh, geez.
But and for example, most IKEA.
You wanted
nerdy.
You wanted nerdy, Steve. There it is. Flash the firmware people, on your bulbs.
You'd be surprised the number of people that flash the firmware on their devices.
Okay, all right.
But then there's things like IKEA. I don't think you can get around using their hub.
Okay, so quick answer is you need the hubs for the devices.
In general,
Home Assistant will communicate with the hub.
In general, that's generally the case. Now there are some, that's one of the reasons why I went Z-Wave too. I wanted Home Assistant to be the hub.
Right. Yeah.
But also if you didn't have, I guess you would have a Z-Wave, antenna, right? But if you didn't have a Z-Wave antenna, instead of using those things aren't necessarily using Wi-Fi, right? Like, so they're
it's a different frequency. You have to have a Z-Wave antenna.
Right. So they're communicating with the hub, and then your hub's plugged into, your Wi-Fi network, right? So
not necessarily. I have a USB dongle that's a Z-Wave.
Well, right. That's
antenna.
What if you did not have that, you would need the hub in order for it to connect to your network.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So that's enough about things that I monitor. There's actually more on the list than I mentioned. I monitor a lot of stuff, but onto the things that I control. The three biggest things that I control are all media related. Like I control the speaker system that I have, I control the Rokus, and I control my TVs. And those are probably the things that my wife and I both interact with the most on Home Assistant. when we like, I don't even know where the remotes are for my TVs or Roku's. Actually, no, that's not true. I know where the remote, the remote for my Roku in the bedroom. The other day, I was updating Home Assistant, so it wasn't working. So I was like, oh, I'll just use the remote, and the batteries were dead.
So how do you control the TV without a remote?
So there's a device called Broadlink RM Pro Plus, which is basically a remote. So it's like a Wi-Fi, like you connect it to your network, and it can read.
You just have a different remote.
Yeah, but it's not a remote control. So basically, it can read or send any packet because like most remotes send non-encrypted packets.
Gotcha. Like a universal remote kind of concept.
Yeah.
Nick, can we pause for a second here? Because I have a overarching question. What are you using to control all this stuff? So I'm assuming you're not like if somebody rings your doorbell, running into your office and looking at your computer, right? Are you using your smartphone? Do you have like a home tablet that you're using? Like how does
so Home Assistant provides a web interface. So I just go to
iOS app.
Yeah, if you have But I just have it bookmarked on my phone, and I just go to the website on my phone. Or if I'm on my computer, I pull it up on the computer. If I'm on my laptop, I pull it. Like everything is done through the web interface.
And your wife does the same thing.
Yep.
And I'm digging into this a little bit more. But the website is like, is it responsive? Is it good to use?
Yeah, it uses web components. It's extremely
fast
and extremely fancy.
All right. I was just curious. I just envisioned like a typical sorry to our listeners, I'm going to generalize here, but like a typical developer experience where it's like, I can control all of this stuff and I can do all these cool things, but then you try to go use the website.
You have
like,
to SSH.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No. It's actually a really nice interface. I'm not a designer. Like it has really fancy widgets. So for example, if you have, like you can customize these things, but by default, if you have a light switch and it's just a switch, not a dimmer, then it just gives you a toggle. You can see that on the camera.
For the listeners who Steven's showing his phone.
Yeah. So if you watch this right now, my office light will come on.
You have to tap the toggle.
You got to aim other side of the screen. There you go. He's trying to do it reverse and it's not working for him.
Did you see my light come on?
Yeah,
I did see that. Okay.
So that's a switch, but a dimmer will show the light with maybe this isn't default, with like a slider that goes around the light. So if you're looking at the screen again, you can see right there. So if you tap the light, it'll turn it on or off, and it remembers the last date, and the slider just tells you what to dim it to. But yeah, it's fully responsive. I'd say the only thing that's weird about it is like layout and positioning things. So if you want to have, this light here and then this light next to it and this light next to it, it's not the most intuitive thing to order them. But it's one of those things you spend 30 seconds tinkering with it and you figure out how to figure it out. And by trial and error, you get it. But no, it looks nice. It's very quick. It's very snappy.
So what do you have what are you using for plugs? I know we're talking about things you control. You're talking about speakers, your TVs, mini splits, but like I have a couple of Wemo plugs that I enjoy thoroughly. And it's funny. So we'll go into a little bit of a story here. I bought Wemo plugs for like my kids' Christmas trees in their rooms and like my Christmas tree. Right. And then after Christmas, I was like, I got all these plugs. Like I'm going to repurpose them. So I put like one in the living room and I put one in like the kids, like the nightlight in the kids' bathroom, stuff like that. And now I'm at like this crisis point where we're coming up to Christmas again. And I'm like, do I take the Wemo's switches out of those areas that I've set up?
Right. Yeah.
Or do I just buy additional ones? So my question
buy additional ones.
Well, that's probably what I'm going to do. But my question comes down to, do you recommend the Wemos, or is there something else that you're particular to?
I personally don't like Wi-Fi devices first. And second, I've seen some horror stories with Wemo. Although usually, and this is just a general PSA, most smart switches cannot handle certain loads. Like they can't handle motors, which includes fans. They can't handle high power devices. Like they're just not made for that.
What kind of fans?
Like any fan.
Really? Because I have my Wemo hooked into a fan in my bedroom right now. It works just fine.
It'll work until it doesn't and melts down. I mean, when you turn a fan on, they pull a really high current in order to get started. That's why, if you ever wondered, fans, when you turn them on, they never go 1, 2, 3. They always go 3, 2, 1 or high, medium, low, because they need the high to get the most current so that they can actually start the motor. So they're it can handle the Wemo could handle the high fan running all day, every day, no problem. But that startup current will eventually cause problems. Or like heaters, like people plug space heaters or hair dryers into these things. Like they are not made for that kind of thing, unless you can get special ones that are. So personally, I use 4 main smart switches. Most of them are Z-Wave though.
Like for John's example, would it make more sense to replace the outlets?
Possibly, but it's same thing. Even the smart outlets, you have to make sure that they're rated for motor loads. Like even like I have smart switches for my fans.
Isn't a 20 volt? Isn't a 20 volt outlet a 20 volt outlet? Like
one 20 volt outlet, but usually they're 15 amps. But
sorry, that's what I meant. 20 amp versus or 15 amp. Like if they got the amperage, like they should be.
Then it doesn't matter what he plugs into it in the future. He can control it.
Yeah. Usually the wall ones are rated much lower than the in wall. Like the wall ones have to be rated to whatever they are, 15 or 20 amps. Whereas the ones you plug in are usually 5 amps or 6 amps. But I would still say, I would still be careful. I would just read the documentation and make sure that it can handle fan. I would never, unless I had a high heavy duty one, I would never plug in like a space heater, for example, to a smart outlet.
I wouldn't just plug in a space heater to a smart outlet anyway. That feels like a recipe.
No, but people
for disaster.
Yeah. But it was about Christmas lights, right? It was about
Christmas lights are fine.
Plugged into just general stuff plugged into an outlet.
Yeah, I mean, if you have no problem with Wi-Fi ones, Wemo are probably the cheapest you can get. I would say that's fine. For me, I prefer Z-Wave, and those right away are going to be a little bit pricier.
But the question I have is, would you? So, like a Wemo is something you plug into the outlet that's already there,
right?
What about replacing the outlet with something that's smart already, so you're not using an extra device?
Yeah, I do that too. Again, the ones that I do that with are always Z-Wave, but I know they do have Wi-Fi ones. I think Leviton and GE both have.
I was actually looking. I think you're right. I
Wi-Fi.
think Leviton and GE both have those. Yeah. I think it's more about portability for me. Like it's a lot easier to move a Wemo switch and rename it, move it around than it is to like rewire it now.
True.
Well, once you rewire it, I don't move it.
Unless it's a place you're always going to use this thing, right?
Right.
It brings up a question that I was thinking about as we were talking here. But what about people who are listening that rent? So we're homeowners, right? What about people who rent and want to do some home automation?
Oh, not even the people that rent though. People that aren't going to live in their house for the rest of their lives, right?
Forever, right?
Because I'm like, when I move out of here, I'm like, probably going to take like the thermostats with me or something, something.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe not because they're old, but like.
And I've moved, so I have that situation. So
I'm taking every single smart outlet and switch that I've installed with me.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that, Nick? Like, have you taken, like, if you've replaced an outlet, let's say you replaced an outlet, do you now like bag that thing and mark it and say this was like the bedroom outlet one, and when you leave, you're going to replace it?
An outlet.
No, I mean, I can't.
Doesn't have to.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, the switches and outlets I didn't keep because they're so cheap, and they were. I bought an older house, so they were pretty junky anyway. Right. Things like I did keep the original doorknobs, so I'll swap those out. Didn't take my locks with me. The Ecobees, I always thought I would take them, but I honestly would probably use the excuse to move away from, a cloud solution and move towards just a Z-Wave local home automation. Because the truth is, even if you just do a general schedule, that's going to get you as much, energy savings as the automatic, like figuring out your schedule thing with Ecobee. Like getting the Ecobee like experience with the generic smart thermostat these days isn't as difficult as it was 5 years ago. And by the time I move in 3 years, that means that the Ecobees are 7 years old. I mean, why would I take a 7-year-old thermostat with me?
It's kind of where I'm at. Like the Nests are at least 5-6 years old. I might as well get the latest.
I guess the issue is if you sell a house, right? Never thought about
you just have to specify. So what I would say is, I would put in this disclosure, I would say smart switches aren't it, like what I would probably say, like, because I've thought about this. Smart switches and outlets are not included unless you pay X price for me to leave them. Like if they're gonna pay me $5,000 to leave them in,
or they could pay Nick like $100 an hour to support them. With
that's what I mean. Things like the cameras. I probably will leave most of the cameras, but not all of them, because again, at that point they're older, and like I'm not gonna pull the wires out of the wall so they could plug them in. But I'm also not gonna leave my security system, like and my server. Like they need the security system and server for everything to work anyway. And like I said, if they'll pay $10,000 to leave it, I'll leave it. But
I have a very strong feeling that Nick's setup is not going to be something another homeowner is going to want to take on.
Yeah,
unless they're very much Nick or Steve.
Yeah, that's part of it too.
Made his house unsellable.
No. I'm just saying that he's going to have to remove all that crap before he's.
But John has a good point. There's actually this discussion crops up from time to time on home automation forums, and it's like most people recommend before you list the house, just swap everything out from smart to dumb, because the truth is your system is your system and it's not going to be attractive to somebody coming in anyway. Yeah. Like people all the time will be like, how do I do it? Do I just set up a Gmail account and move it? It's like, you're going to end up supporting that and they're not going to understand it anyway. So I would swap that stuff out.
I would also say the flip side of that is if you're showing your house, like every house that we looked at, I was like, oh, is this house wired for internet? Like there are some people that are looking for certain things.
My house is wired for internet. Like I'm not going to hide that.
But if they see those smart switches, they're going to be like, oh, this is a smart switch. Like, okay, cool. This guy, like, I'm going to buy this house. I'm going to get this smart switch. And then next thing you know, they move in and it's like, oh, nope, that's a dumb switch now. What the hell?
You for things that this is just a general PSA, I guess, about house buying and selling. Fixtures come with the house. Like if you see a smart switch plugged in, or I'm not like a plugged in, but if you see a smart switch, there's a smart switch and you purchase the house, you better damn well have that smart switch.
Yeah, right. It's unless otherwise stated, right?
Yeah, like I said, like that's why this disclosure would just say like smart switches will be swapped out. Like I would just be explicit, and I probably would just change them up before we sold, just so it wouldn't be a problem.
Two other things that are controlled that I want to touch on before we move on to the automation section of our show. For a long time, obviously going back to the Christmas lights thing, I had outdoor Christmas lights and I had like a timer and it was fine. It was cool, like whatever. But I recently bought a Casa outdoor plug, which is pretty awesome because it's weatherproof and it has two plugs on it and you can control them independently of one another. So it's kind of nice because like certain lights, for example, prime example, the floodlight that floods the front of my house with light during holiday time is really, really annoying, especially when it shines in your windows when you're trying to sleep. So having that go off at 9:00 and then having the rest of the Christmas lights go off at a later time is super appealing. I know that's like total suburban homeowner problem, but I'm just saying outdoor devices, waterproof devices are pretty interesting in general. I know that Philips Hue has lights, outdoor waterproof lights. And the other thing this summer that has completely blown my mind, changed my world, is my Wi-Fi enabled air conditioner. I know Nick talked about turning on and off the air conditioner, but I'm bought an LG air conditioner this past summer, and it has an app, and it's pretty spiffy. It's great to be able to control the air conditioner from my smartphone. So
the advantage with like Home Assistant or a hub like that would be to control that without your phone.
Yeah.
Would be to be smart about, hey, we just walked in the house. It's time to turn it on, or based on time of day or things like that.
Or, I mean, even more complex, right? To Nick's point, where he's monitoring the outside temperature. You could say, hey, the outside temperature just went up above 75. Turn on the air conditioner to get it back down to 70 in the house.
But you know what,
right?
John, that's not super complex like with Home Assistant. That's like built in.
Yeah, I mean,
hey, the outside temperature is this, do this action.
Yeah, it starts to get complex when you start adding conditions. So, for example, you can do things like, because you can monitor, like, I don't do this because I don't like this kind of data being tracked, but like, say you can add occupancy sensors. Like, you can have your GPS from your phone report back to Home Assistant. You can do things like when I get within 10 miles of the house and I'm heading towards the house, turn the AC on unless the windows are open, or you can do things like make sure that, because they're independent systems, make sure your AC and your heat can never be turned on at the same time. Like if somebody tries to turn the AC on and the heat on at the same time, it'll just, throw an alarm. You can do things like, so yeah, why don't we move to things that I've automated? One of the most useful things that I think I automated, or a couple of the most useful things, one was, like I said, the doorbell, so that, we ring the doorbell when we get home sometimes. Like if we're out and it gets dark before we expected, we didn't turn the lights on, just ring the doorbell, the light turns on, and then you can get in the house easier. And if you unlock the door and it's after sunset,
can't you just open your phone and turn the light on?
Yeah, but it's easier if you're carrying bags, you just went shopping or something. It's easier just to push a button.
It's easier to fall up the stairs, push the doorbell than it is to just turn it on from the car. I hear you. I got you.
I mean, I suppose. I mean, that's the nice thing about this. Everybody can automate it how they want. The other thing that we do is if you unlock the front door and it's after sunset, it'll turn on the kitchen light and the mudroom light automatically as well.
I do have an automation for that. For when somebody pulls into the driveway, if you're the first person home, the living room light goes on, which is super nice. Super nice. I agree.
After that, the most useful one is I automated laundry notifications. So I took a Z-Wave colorable LED strip and I put it on the underside of my kitchen island. So it goes around the perimeter of my island. And I have a Z-Wave power monitor for the washing machine, and it monitors the washing machine. So washing machines when they turn on, they don't use power constantly because they stop turning, they take a break, they decide to hang out, and then they turn on again. So it basically checks to see. So if the power goes above 10 watts, then it says, hey, the washing machine is currently running. And if at any point in the next 5 minutes it goes above 10 watts again, it just restarts the timer. So it's constantly saying, oh, it was running. Is it still running? Because it can stop for up to 2 minutes in any cycle. So if at any point within that time it starts again, it goes, oh, it's still running. Once it's stopped.
Go ahead, finish.
Yeah. Once it's stopped and it's not turning on again, it sends a message to every someone else in the house saying that the washing machine finished, and then it turns the LED strip to orange, so that way we know, like if we we're watching a movie or something and we get up to get a glass of water, go in the kitchen, we see it's orange, we know. I don't know, that's the color we chose.
Oh, so okay. Nick, that seems to me like
reason.
It seems to me like an automation that is more fun to build than is practical. Like everyone knows when you put something in the washer, in an hour it's done.
Right? Yeah, but you have to
hold on.
Have the whole house tell me.
Hold on a second.
Finished in an hour.
Hold on a second. In Nick's defense, right?
I'm not criticizing. You
No,
know,
Have you never forgotten a load of laundry?
Yeah, but that's not the point.
So,
I mean,
but that's
the
a-
notification could go off and I could still not remember.
Well,
it.
no, but the light stays orange, so it gives
Okay.
you a notification like
Until
it's done.
when?
You can go change it until you. So
How does
it'll
the
turn
orange
off.
go off?
There's two ways that it goes off. One, if you started another load, it'll automatically turn off because laundry has started it again. You don't have to do anything. Otherwise, you have to. There's a Z-Way button right next to the strip.
Okay,
You just
right.
push it and it'll turn it off.
Okay.
So basically, you have to acknowledge the alert and it'll shut the
Okay.
alert off.
All right.
But yeah, so like it's a constant alert. So, or if you more often we use this, like you throw a load of laundry in and you go to the store and do something, you come back 2 hours later, you're gonna forget. Of course you know it's done, but you forgot that you started a load of laundry. You walk in the door, the lights are orange.
Okay,
You go, oh,
all right,
okay,
okay.
I gotta change it.
also, I will say that washing machines are not very accurate. At least I'm finding that our washing machine will say, hey, I'll be done in 48 minutes. And then an hour and 12 minutes later, it's still kind of going through its progressions. So
Really?
yes,
Yeah.
because different sensors are sensing different things and adjusting the time based on like, hey, it
Yeah.
needs more spinning or less spinning or whatever. So I can see the value in that.
And I didn't want to have to I didn't want to have to put it in and push a button to remember to push a button to start it. Like I just wanted something that said, hey, there's a load that's ready to change.
Nick, let me ask you this. What about push notifications?
You can do them. I mean, it depends on what system you're using. But yeah, you can do those. Yeah, I mean, and to be fair, this has been one of the most solid notification systems too. Like it's pretty much 100%.
It's like, it seems to me it's ingenious about how you figured to do this based on the power coming from the washer.
Yep.
Like that seems to me it took a lot of testing, or you got like a recipe from somewhere.
No,
But it's pretty impressive how you figured that
I
out.
mean, the delay is a little bit longer than it needs to be. I never went back and optimized it, but so I think it's a 5-minute timer. So like it just checks with if it sees power within a 5-minute period, it restarts the clock. What else do I automate?
This is an example where you're scripting in Home Assistant, right?
No, it's a combination of Home Assistant and Node-RED. So I have
a scripting tool, right?
Yeah, so I have an automation in Home Assistant that converts power usage to a Boolean. So it basically sets a status of washing machine as active. And then Node-RED is just a way to set automations that's a little bit simpler than Home Assistant's interface. So it uses the data from Home Assistant. It gives commands to Home Assistant, but the logic runs there.
It's funny because, as the listeners know, I recently purchased a new washer and dryer, and it came from LG, and it came with this app to connect to your phone. And I'm like, I said to my wife, "You want to connect this?" She's like, "No, that's stupid." She's like, "I put something in the washer. I know it's going to be done in an hour." It's like, I don't need anything telling me.
She doesn't want to get
that
push
it's done.
notifications.
That's mind blowing to me because like I swear I would forget every single load in the laundry if I didn't have this. Like obviously eventually I remember, but your clothes smell better if you do it within 5 minutes. You know?
Exactly, no question.
So
they smell good if you do it within 12 hours. When you go,
well,
beyond that, it's a problem.
I'm not. It's not that I don't forget it like overnight or anything.
Right.
Or if I did, I'd just have to rewash them anyway. But this is like since we've done this, I just never forgot it. And it's the same. And I can set it up. One thing I haven't quite finished is now that the dryer has power monitoring, I can set it up to, if they're both running, not turn on until the dryer is finished too, because you can't change. There's no reason to go down. If the washer finishes and the dryer is still going, there's no point in going down.
To optimize your time.
Yeah, there's no point in going down because the dryer, you can't put the wet clothes in the dryer yet.
Right. Yeah.
So what else I also use automations to simplify interfaces. So for example, I mentioned the speaker system, and the speaker system that I have consists of inputs and outputs. And so for example, you can say, I want input 1, which happens to be a Sonos, to go to output 3. And then you'd have to go into the Sonos app and say, okay, the Sonos that is on the home, the home speaker system, I want it to play this music, right? That's multiple interfaces. It's really complex. So what I did is I set up a system basically so that it's just a toggle. You say, I want to listen to this radio station in this room. And or these 5 rooms or whatever. And then you tell it to start. And it says, okay, we're looking at this radio station on the Sonos. So it tells the Sonos to start playing that. And then it says, okay, that means source 1 needs to be set in rooms 2, 3, and 5. And it just starts that. And so you basically go in the system. And so my wife can just say, I want to listen to the Colombian radio station in the bedroom in the morning. And she just hits the button and starts playing the music. And then when she's ready to go in the kitchen and start making breakfast, she could say, okay, now I want to have it in the living room too. And so it starts playing.
Nick,
immediately.
2 questions there. How do you say? What is the say? Like, what is that going into?
It's just a list of toggles. So like you have,
do you have microphones everywhere? You can't just say stuff.
No, it's not saying like verbal. It's saying like in the app, you just toggle. So like you toggle bedroom, living room speakers, and you just
he's using say as pick up my phone and press a button. Not
exactly.
Like, I thought he was like using say.
Yeah, not verbal. Although you can do it.
Hey, Laflin House, play the Colombian radio station.
Yeah. I know you can do it verbal. I just thought you were.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not yet. And then probably my favorite automation for the home speaker system is I have a kill switch that I press and it shuts off the music in every room in the house because, Joanna, she loves music. So by the time she leaves in the morning, 3 rooms are playing music, and I sit down to, work right before she leaves, and all the music is still playing.
That sounds like an automation.
So, sometimes I can listen to it. No, but sometimes I can hear it, so I listen to it too. But if I'm about to jump on a call, right. There's just a kill switch. I hit it and everything shuts off immediately. So I think I could probably go on for another hour
I will say,
on home automation, but
I will say listening to Nick makes me feel like I'm very much underutilizing home automation because, basically I just have like lights going on at certain times and lights going on when people come home. And like, for example, my kids' night lights are Philip Hue light strips, like underneath their beds, and they go on at 7:30 and they go off at 8 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, other than automating lights and like obviously the Nest thermostats, I guess I'm not taking full advantage of my automation possibilities.
But
seems like a good place to start though, John.
Yeah. Sure. And in home automation, it has to fit your lifestyle and your needs. Yeah. I mean, it does. This is my hobby. It takes a lot of my time. Like even if I'm not tinkering with the system, it takes time to, plan what you want to do with things. It takes time to debug it and get it working solid. I mean, sometimes just setting up a simple automation like that on lights is just,
I will say
it's pretty straightforward.
I will say my favorite home automation. So when we moved into our house, there was a light switch in our master bedroom that controlled a switch, or controlled a plug all the way on the other end of the room. And like the way that we set up our bed and was not anywhere near that plug. So like when you flip the switch, like the TV would go off or on because like that's what was plugged into it. And I'm like, okay, this is dumb. So we ended up just making that switch dead, like removing it. So like nobody would be turning off or on the TV. Right. And I buried the wires. I didn't bury them. I capped them and put them back into the box, cover it with just a solid plate. So that switch was effectively gone. But then that left a problem because we had no way to turn lights on in our master bedroom other than going to the light and pulling the string. And then, I don't know, one day I saw like a Philips Hue package that was like 2 bulbs and a switch. And I was like, I was like, this is amazing. So you basically obviously put the bulbs in the lamps, and then the switch, I don't know if it stuck or if it actually screwed into the existing wall plate, but the switch is now mounted to the wall where the switch would be. And it's, simple toggle on off. And then the one in the middle is like, upper or lower or whatever, but like completely solved the problem that I was like, this sucks. Like, this is like, why is that wired all the way over there where it doesn't make any sense?
You just reminded me. So speaking of automations, you forget about them. You just reminded me of an automation that I have that I completely forgot. One of the other big advantages of having all smart switches is that problem doesn't exist anymore. You can make any switch control any light. So for example, if we come into the house in the living room door, there's 2 light switches right next to that door. One of them controls the outside light and one of them controls the switch right next to it. There's no way to control the lights in the living room from there. You have to go all the way across the room. Now, we don't usually use that door, but we do occasionally use it. And if it's dark, you basically have to walk across the room to turn the light on. But that other switch, I can just say, hey, when this switch is turned on, turn on the living room lights too.
Yeah, it's great.
And vice versa. So it just means every switch can control any light in the house. So if you ever, for whatever reason, you need to reconfigure them, you just go into Home Assistant and reconfigure them and tie them together.
Great.
And there you go.
You probably have been the best guest we've ever had on the show.
Let's edit that part out. We don't want the other guests to feel bad.
No.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that. John was pretty great.
Oh, come on now. We can say that. So this has been an amazing few hours, maybe. I'm not sure how we'll edit this down, but it's been really a great.
It's going to be at least an hour and a half.
Yeah, at least an hour and a half. A great start into home automation. So thank you, Nic, for joining us today.
Remember, listeners, if you have questions or feedback, you can reach out to us on Twitter at Talking Drupal. You can also talk to us in the Talking Drupal channel on the Drupal Slack. And last but not least, you can email us at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can get show updates by signing up for our newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And I would like to take a moment to say thank you to our patrons for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choose Become a Patron. And patrons get a private feed that gets a little bit of the before and after show as well.
Which is pretty big today. So, John Picozzi, where can people reach out to you?
You can reach out to me on all the major social networks and Drupal.org at John Picozzi. You can check out my website, johnpicozzi.com, and you can find out about Oomph at oomphinc.com.
How about you, Nic?
You can reach me pretty much everywhere at NicSpan. If you have any questions about home automation, I'm usually on the Drupal Slack.
And I'm Stephen Cross. You can find me at Stephen Cross on Twitter. And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
See you guys next week.
Have a good one.